Now it is time to move on to our next segment in open sourced and dig into sort of the what goes into a lot of our coverage here. And I want to talk about Microsoft. And yesterday, Devindra, you spent some time at the big Surface event. So why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, I spent the whole day with Microsoft. A lot of stuff happening. I'll save the most exciting stuff for the end. But they announced the Windows 10 Creators Update, which is going to be coming in spring and has a couple nice changes. Paint is now going to be called Paint 3D. I think it's going to be, I don't know if it's replacing Paint, but Paint 3D is a new app, just like Paint, that'll let you create 3D objects, and they're really aiming it at kids because a lot of kids, Microsoft Paint is one of the first things they end up playing with. You'll be able to create 3D objects, bring in stuff from Minecraft, which is pretty cool, do some edits there, and straight from there, 3D print it. So Microsoft kind of has the whole cycle of like building and creating and producing 3D printed objects. That's kind of interesting and probably the most fascinating thing about this update. Beyond that, there's going to have built-in game broadcasting too, which is kind of cool, although I think people who are doing this are already doing it on Twitch or something. There's a new sharing feature which puts your closest contacts like in the taskbar, so you can quickly like share files with them or send them messages. I'll have a longer story on that coming soon. Beyond that, Surface Book is getting some new hardware, more battery life, faster processor, faster graphics, and the Surface Studio, which is Microsoft's Surface all-in-one, which is gorgeous. It is
which was rumored, but I think somehow managed to be surprising and impressive to you guys, even though you've kind of went in thinking you knew what you were going to see.
Yeah, we thought the rumors were like there were going to be multiple all-in-ones with some sort of like rotating display. But seeing it in person, it's a 28-inch screen, gorgeous resolution. It's like 4,500 by 3,000 pixels, so higher than 4K. And the key feature is that the screen floats down. You can kind of push it down to 20-degree angle, which is about the same as a drafting table, and seeing that in action, it's just gorgeous. And moving it yourself, like it's so easy to move. They made it so that even a 5-year-old could do it, but it also, the screen can be in any angle in between being straight up and 20 degrees, and it's pretty solid there too. It's basically a mini PC with a giant screen, right? It has a Intel 6th generation processor, decent NVIDIA mobile graphics, not desktop graphics, but you could plug in up to 32 gigabytes of RAM, a lot of storage. Basically the ultimate computer for professionals, and starting at $3,000 too. So those are going to be the people who are going to be buying it, like MacBook or Mac Pro users, potentially.
That's not a small price tag. And I mean, they also have like a bunch of accessories and stuff too, right? Yeah,
there's so they have this new thing called the Surface Dial, which is, think of like the best audio amplifier, dial that you could think of. It has a great feel to it. You could put it right on the Surface Studio screen, and it opens up other options depending on the app you're using. So in Photoshop, it'll let you actually change the color of the palette or change the size of the brush. You can kind of choose how it works. Basically, a way for you to use both of your hands at the same time to create and get in the creation zone. It's pretty cool. It's something I haven't seen before, and it'll also work with other surfaces, although not on their screens. You'll have to like keep it on the desk.
Does it also have a pen input like the...
Yeah.
Okay.
And it has a Surface Pen too. I think it's slightly improved, but it's basically the same as we've seen before. And also, not as exciting, there's a new wireless keyboard and mouse. I'm a big Microsoft like input device fan, so that looks cool to me. And they're going to have a Surface ergonomic natural keyboard as well, which I cannot wait to test.
Which we've already established you're a huge fan of those things.
It's so good.
I don't get it.
It feels great.
So you had fun yesterday.
Yeah.
I had fun, like as much as I could have fun, getting up early, waiting out in the cold for an hour, and getting to play with this hardware was pretty cool. I got to talk with some Microsoft folks about how they did it. This device is just really intriguing. You look at it, there's only one cable coming out of it. That's the power cable. Everything else is kind of the display cables, the audio cables, they're in the hinge. Like they're actually in the hinge that's bending up and down. So it's a very clean looking device. I've honestly never seen a desktop that looks like this. Even it's so different from even the iMac.
And they're pitching it. It seems like Microsoft's whole big pitch now is pitching it at the people who would normally buy an iMac.
Yeah, the very high-end iMacs, like the 27-inchers, or even I think the Mac Pros. And those professionals are people that Apple has honestly ignored for the past couple of years. The Mac Pro is an aging machine with old hardware. It was a cool design, but a lot of people didn't like it because it's not very upgradable. You can't do much with it. Same thing here. You can't really upgrade this, but it's a really nice, compact way. And this screen is just a new form of interaction we just haven't really seen before. Microsoft showed off a couple apps. I think Sketchable, which is sort of like a drawing app. Another one is like a motion comics app. I forget the name of that. But anybody who's drawing, drafting, doing architecture type stuff, there's a company that builds architecture software that's been using it too. All very cool, very useful. Like people who really want to get their hands dirty with it could be a good thing.
It's sort of funny to see us come full circle because the first Surface, even before the first commercialized Surface product came out, it was that big, just big Surface display.
Yeah, it was a big, like the big coffee table.
Yeah.
I think it was wasn't it like a CRT? I don't even think it was LCD at that point.
No, it
like
wasn't
huge.
CRT. I think it was rear projection.
Yeah.
It took a while, but we finally come back to this big, expansive canvas of a display that people can use to.
Well, the Surface Hub is a thing that's out and being sold right now too, and that's like an even bigger screen, and that's
not for consumers.
$8,000, $9,000. Yeah, that's for businesses. This is more for professionals. Right. Honestly, I don't even think the Surface Studio is really for consumers, like typical consumers.
Rich, curious early adopters, maybe.
Those people. Yeah.
But I mean, so here's the thing that's sort of interesting to me, and Robbie, one of our editors, wrote a piece about this yesterday. Is like you were saying that Apple's kind of ignored this professional class for the last little bit, and they've pushed more towards targeting your average consumer. And now Microsoft has said, we've owned this like productivity, this office thing for so long. Now they're making a really explicit play for like the creative types that Apple has always had cornered.
It's making the play for creatives is kind of new for Microsoft, but it kind of goes down to the way Satya Nadella has been pushing the company. Like he's been positioning Microsoft as a company for people who get things done. It's a very pragmatic philosophy, but it works because like Microsoft products have not always been pretty, but I've always been a Windows user because I've been able to do more with it. It's always been more flexible than like Mac OS and definitely more than Linux for me. So they're kind of honing in on that philosophy, and it kind of makes sense. Like hearing Nadella was there at the event, whatever he says, I don't know who writes his speeches. It could just be him writing it himself, but he is so inspirational in everything he says. And Microsoft is really hammering down the idea of creativity and believing in creators and makers and things like that. And it's just weird. That's stuff you'd normally hear from Apple,
Do you think there's a lot of money to be made there, though, or is it purely a status play? Because I think, Apple had that market cornered. They had like, if you were a designer, if you were a writer, or whatever, you used a Mac. But even with that market cornered, Apple barely survived the 90s. Yep. So for Microsoft, do they actually think there's like this big untapped market that they're going to make a ton of profit from, or are they just like, we want to have Surface studios on TV?
It does seem more, I guess it's a bit of everything, right? It's a status thing. It shows that Microsoft can build a giant all-in-one sort of PC like this. But in some ways, it also shows the future of desktop computing too, right? You are not just staring at a monitor. You're maneuvering it so it's more flexible for you. You're, painting on it with a stylus. You could do a lot more than you could with computers in the past. And the industry is just so different now. So I think there is a decent market here. But mostly it's for Microsoft to say, hey, we can do this. And the Surface has always been kind of an ideal for other PC makers. So maybe it'll push others to kind of be so creative too.
So I think this is, I don't want to call it a hobby. I think it really is a real business for Microsoft. I just don't think it's going to be their bread and butter. In a way, I think Microsoft is in a similar boat as Google. You could take away both of their device businesses and they'd still be fabulously rich, big companies. But I think similar to what Devindra was saying, it's helpful for a company like Microsoft to have a flagship device that is not only a beacon for other device makers, but really puts the software in its best light. I mean, I think this is great exposure for Windows itself, even if not that many people need a Surface Studio or end up buying
You'll
one.
walk by it in a store and just be like, wow. And that idea is incepted in your head that Microsoft makes products that make you say, wow. So I think that's kind of the big thing. And we saw last year, the Surface business overall has surpassed $1 billion for Microsoft. It's probably not making much profit, but the business is growing very quickly.
Yeah, it's done better, at least in terms of pure revenue, than I think a lot of people expected.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, early on, wasn't there a quarter where they actually had to write off?
Oh yeah, the Surface
a-
RT, it was basically almost $1 billion, like
Right.
700 to $1 billion that they had to write off.
So now that it makes any money at all is an
That's
improvement. It doesn't mean it's going to pay all their bills, but they won't say no to more money.
For sure,
Yeah.
for sure. And one thing we didn't mention in the Surface Pro 4, not changing at all. Same hardware as last year, same price as last year. That's kind of annoying to me. I've argued for a long time they should be including the keyboard in the price of the Surfaces. That's another $130
Yeah.
you'll be paying on top of the $899. At this point, it's a year old. Just like throw that in, make that clear. Every time I talk to people at Microsoft, they keep saying the Surface is a great value. That was true last year, less true a year later.
Yeah.
You know?
That was one of the biggest stories actually from yesterday, which is weird that this, no news is news somehow. But yeah, I was surprised that it didn't even get like a minor spec bump or a price cut or anything.
We've been saying the same thing with Apple when they failed to update the MacBook Air. I think when the Surface Pro, one of their flagship products, gets long in the tooth, you have to point that out also.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's a thing of we've grown accustomed at this point to like really reliable upgrade cycles, and when all of a sudden a company skips one, even by a couple of months, everybody like loses their shit and thinks the world is coming to an end.
And I'm fine with skipping it if you kind of give us something back in return. Like maybe the people who are waiting for the Surface Pro 4 to come down in price get a deal, something like that. That would be nice.
I mean, not that this will likely happen, but who knows? Maybe next week Microsoft will quietly release an update to the Surface Pro 4 and just be like, we didn't feel like taking time up at the event.
I expect some decent Black Friday deals. Maybe that's what they're waiting for.
Although the chances of them updating it in the next couple of weeks are pretty much non-existent since they wasted time on the Surface Book i7, which is perhaps the worst named device Microsoft has ever released.
Yeah. Well, is it that the official name? It's just the i7 version of the Surface Book. So kind of what has already been there.
I thought that was the official name. I might be wrong on that. We might have to double check that one. But I was pretty sure that the official name was Surface
Book i7,
which is terrible.
Yeah.
You don't want to name things after processors.
Yeah. At least 16 hours of battery life, so they claim, even with like the usual like overestimation that if they get at least 12 hours, that's a good number for a desktop like that or laptop.
Thank goodness we have a battery test that can time itself so that I don't have to sit next to it for 16 hours while I'm reviewing it.
Yes.
I'm going to throw it out there right now, though. If they successfully make a laptop that lasts 16 hours on a charge, I will buy it.
Yeah.
Like, without question, trade in my ThinkPad, I become a Surface guy.
Trade in your ThinkPad.
That's not saying much. You've already made clear on this podcast you don't really like that thing.
Oh,
you're like cursed with it.
I am cursed with it. Well, this is like really off topic, but I love my ThinkPads. I've always been a ThinkPad guy. I've had great experiences. There are things I love about this machine. I just think they made several mistakes with the keyboard.
Have you seen the ThinkPad OLED yet? We reviewed that. I'll show you that after show.
I mean,
OLED.
I don't know. I want a mechanical keyboard on my laptop.
What?
I just want to go back to like the old school ThinkPad. I'm gonna break out my like whatever. I think the last one I had was the X200.
Oh, that was great. Yeah.
It still works. It's still fine. It's just the battery doesn't last anymore. Any last thoughts or anything on Microsoft before we move on?
I mean, I'm really looking forward to reviewing the Surface Studio. That's going to be fun on my desk. And I imagine a lot of AOLers will also be like, what the heck is that? That is such a strange looking computer. So
I plan on being in the office that week.
That's what happened when I reviewed the Surface Book last year.
Yeah. And we'll have review of that at some point too.
IT especially will come by your desk.
Yeah.
What's that?